Okay, awesome. So wrap up your story. You tell them the story, wrap up your story. We'll come back. Okay, when you finish your story, have a seat, go back to your seats. When you're done with your story, go back to your seat. All right, you have 5 more seconds. Wrap up your story. 5 seconds. Wrap up your story. Have a seat. 5 more seconds.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, I know you really good story. 2 more seconds, wrap it up.
What do you do?
So that's the great thing about this, right? Usually people are very hesitant, and then you can't get them to wrap up. Okay, all right, so, great. I love this. When I do these kind of things, oftentimes people are very hesitant. Okay, gentlemen, let's wrap it up. Usually when I do this, when I do presentations, people are very timid at first. And then we open up the can of worms and everybody wants to talk, which is awesome. So you share the story with the past, from your past. So what I want you to do now is, everyone doesn't have to do this. What I want to do is have 1 or 2 people share, maybe 3 people since you have a large group. 3 people share, but I don't want you to share your person's story. I don't want you to share your story, and I don't want you to share your partner's story. But what I want you to do is share 1 characteristic that you can use to describe the person you spoke to based on what they shared about their story. Remember, you shared a story about yourself, right? So what I'm doing now is asking your partner to say, based on what you share with them, what's 1 characteristic they could say about you, an affirming one, of course, right? Everyone understand?
Yeah.
So what's 1 positive thing you could say about the person based on the story they told you? Who wants to go first? Anybody want to share something you could say? Okay, first you, and then I have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Martha is social.
Say it again.
Martha is social.
She's social.
Yeah.
Okay.
She likes interacting.
Okay. Okay, good, excellent. Social, she's really interactive and she's smart, right? Okay, excellent. Who else? I think here. What did you say about your partner?
Celia loves to travel
Mm-hmm.
and she works in finance
Mm-hmm.
and she's been married for 3 years.
Okay, good. So she's a family person, right? She
Yes.
loves to travel, maybe like adventure, right?
And she loves her job.
And she loves her work, right? She's really passionate about what she does. Excellent. Okay. Yes.
My partner is goal-oriented and motivated.
Goal-oriented and motivated. Excellent. Excellent. I think I saw 1 more person. 1 or 2 more people who wants to share? Okay, yes.
My partner, she's, I can't say she's disciplined. Like, the story she told me was about her first time coming to America, but through that I can see like when she discusses about morning prayers and everything, that reflects somebody's discipline in life. So,
Exactly. Excellent. So discipline, right? She's spiritual and discipline, right? And those things are important. You notice you all share personal stories, but yet we have these great characteristics that are applicable to the workplace, right? And so do you see how you can make that connection? It's not always about sharing exactly about your work. You want to share about who you are, because even from a 2-minute story, people can get these ideas about who you are and how you might actually show up to the workplace, right? Because in general, the idea, this is not always true, it's not 100%. However, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? I'll say it again. How you do anything is how you do everything. So if you are passionate, disciplined, adventurous, most likely you'll be that similar in the workplace. Now, there's some things that don't often apply. You don't want to necessarily include in the workplace, but you can make, you all are adults, so you make a decision about which things make sense. But for the most part, how you do things is how you do things, right? Make sense? Anybody have a question about that or thought on that? No? Okay, awesome. So here you are. We heard, you got my resume, right? So these are things you can find. An engineer by training, educator in practice, and entrepreneur at heart. Many, many things you can read about it online, right? But one of the things what you don't know about me is that I have been protesting alphabetical order since the age of 2. And the reason why I'll tell you how. So when I was very, very young in nursery school, it was time for graduation and we finished the year. It was time for us to move on to the next phase. And one of the things that they did was they lined us up in order. And so our families were in the audience, everybody was there, we were really excited. We had our cap and gowns on. It was just amazing, right? And so we got in line and then this is the story my mother told me, right? I refused to cross the stage. I didn't like it. I had a problem with it. I didn't like it at all. And the reason why is I was sick and tired of being the last one in line. My last name is Young, right? So I was always at the end. So, we learned the alphabet in nursery school and I'm like, this is ridiculous. We have to do something different. I don't like being at the end. So what they had to do was call my mother out of the audience and try to get me to walk across the stage. I still refused. So what they did was they changed the order of the program, because I was very insistent on, I don't want to be the last, I'm tired of the last. And to this day, I still am very much anti-alphabetical order for many things for that expressed reason. It's helpful though, because there are times when people have names that begin with Z or, they're after Y-O-U-N-G, so it's helpful. But I'm really, really sensitive about it. But what came out of that is this idea that story is really an example of who I am to this very day. I like order. I don't mind it. I understand it, but I'm okay with shaking it up a little bit, right? And so from that story, people often tell me that, oh, Takia, you're really determined. You're like disciplined. You fight for things if you feel like there's something worth fighting for, right? So these are things that you might get from a story. You wouldn't necessarily find that out by looking at my resume, right? You wouldn't necessarily know that unless I told the story, okay? And it's a small story. It's something from many, many years ago. I'm no longer in nursery school, right? But it's a story that sticks with me because my mother tells it to people all the time, still to this day. And she says, that's who Takia is. She's very much from the very beginning, from a very young age, she was very focused and wanted the things to be different than the norm, right? And that's who I am. So we're gonna jump into the idea of going from personal to business, because as I mentioned, in the past, a lot of storytelling and ideas really kind of landed in the personal space, and people felt that they almost have to be like a robot and look a certain way and have certain things be a certain way. And we all are very, very different. If we look across the room, this is a very diverse room. But even for those of us who might look alike for whatever reason, whether it's clothes, skin color, hair, whatever, even if we were to dig a little bit deeper, we would discover that there's even more that's different and unique about us. And I'm a big believer in turning up what makes you unique and bringing that to the forefront and allowing it to be an asset as opposed to something that's detrimental to you. Make sense? Okay. I didn't mention that we will have some Q&A time at the end, but if you feel inspired to ask a question throughout, feel free to just raise your hand. And if it's something I can address at the time, I'll do it. If it's something I think makes sense to go at the end, then I'll just let you know, okay? Make sense? All right, awesome. So, excuse me, when you tell a story around the personal side, it actually gives you insight into your background It allows you to share characteristics about who you are, as well as it helps position yourself for workplace success. Because a lot of times people will attach that same story that you've shared, maybe in your interview, they'll attach it to who you are, and it might travel with you as you do your reviews, as you do other things in the workplace. A story gets developed about you, regardless of whether you open your mouth about it or not, right? And so it's very important that when you have the opportunity to craft the story, that you craft it. It doesn't make sense to take the time to craft a story that's not authentic to who you are, okay? And that's what we'll spend a little bit of time doing today. So when you think about stories, especially personal stories, right? How many of you, when I said share a story about yourself, you thought, I don't know if I want to share that part, or I'm not sure if I want to share that part, right? And that's true. It's important because you think, I can't tell that story, right? I can't tell when that thing happened. I can't tell this about my country. I can't say this about my family. I can't say this because you think those things do not belong in the workplace. And so, yes, the first point you'll see is that I have here is that, yes, not every story should be told, right? Some things you don't want to tell, but most of them you actually can tell. It's just how you tell the story, okay? It's how you share them. Anybody ever think, there's some things that have happened, but I don't want to ever say it because I'm afraid that somebody might judge me? Anybody ever feel that way? All the time, right? All the time, right? So remember, sometimes the people who are in the workplace, they're not your family members, they're not your friends. So they may not have the same context around it. And so they might be more open to it. Or that might be the connection point for you, right? But when you find stories that you think might be a little bit unique or touchy, think about which part of what do you actually want to get out of the story, right? What is the key element? Because you don't necessarily need to share all the details of the story, it might be key components of the story that might be essential to you. We'll talk about that, right? But interestingly enough, the story that's the hardest for you to tell might actually be the story that you actually need to tell, right? The one that might be the hardest for you. Now, of course, we're not in therapy right now, right? Definitely, if you know, there's nothing wrong with therapy. Definitely check that out and do that because that's good for you. However, sometimes, you know, what's really holding you back might be the thing that you need to kind of put in the forefront, right? That people might be interested in seeing about you, right? Because resumes are a dime a dozen, credentials, degrees are a dime a dozen, right? You can, especially in Washington, D.C. area, the D.C. metro area, people are very talented. I mean, people across the world are very talented, but in this particular space, it's global. DC is a very global city. So the fact that you might be from somewhere else, yes, it's unique, but not that unique, right? You probably can go downstairs right in the corner there and stand up and find people from 10 different countries just standing there. If you stand there for 30 minutes and ask, where are you from, right? So that's not what makes you unique. What makes you unique is the experience that you have, and we want to bring that to the forefront. Make sense? Okay. Yes.
So,
What's your name?
David.
David, yes.
So you can tell the story, but I took one of those personality profile tests.
Mhm.
I can't remember. I think it was called DISC or something.
Okay.
I can't remember what the letters mean.
Mhm.
But one of the things that came out of that was that I'm good at telling, but I'm not good at selling. But it seems like if you're going and you're looking for a job, there's more emphasis on selling and not telling. So how do you sort of make that switch if you're trying to tell a story? If it's an interview situation, it's less about telling the story, but more about selling something. And so from that perspective, how do you flip the switch where it's not telling, it's selling? This is what I have, this is what I can do, and blah, 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 blah. So,
Well, that's an interesting question. So the idea is when you, not necessarily specific to a role, but the idea of how do you sell yourself? That
Well,
part,
yeah,
or you mean specific to a role?
But yeah, because in that situation, it's not necessarily telling your story, I mean, telling them your story, but it's more or less selling who you are and what you can do, as opposed to telling them who you are. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. So some of it, I think it's interconnected, okay? So for example, you all earlier gave some characteristics about each other, but they weren't necessarily trying to sell themselves on, oh, I'm disciplined, I'm this. You're just talking, right? So it's really being able to tell the story. Interestingly enough, the biggest thing in sales is around storytelling, how people are able to sell well because they're able to tell a story. So I think it's kind of, they're interconnected, and it might be a unique situation to you. So maybe we can talk a little bit more later about one-on-one. But what I will say is this: when you go into the workplace, it's important to, or a work environment. Yes, it's important to have your credentials, but then, like I said, credentials can sometimes be a dime a dozen in some cases, unless it's extremely unique. So then it's almost like not what do you do, what do you have, like how do you show up to that a little bit differently? What kind of perspective do you bring to the table? I think it's kind of like your unique selling proposition, your unique value. And we're going to get into core values a little bit more personal, but I think in those kind of situations, when you want to let them know what you have, but you don't necessarily want to be in the space where you're trying to convince them, but you kind of do need to convince them that, you kind of do need to convince them that you're good. I think it's important to show what do you bring that's unique to it, right? So my background is in physics and bioengineering. My degree is, I have a bachelor's of science in physics. I studied math and Japanese, and then my master's is in bioengineering. However, I'm an engineer by training, but I'm not a practicing engineer, right? So for me, the space that I'm often in is in the management space. I've been in management, nonprofit, academia, but mostly in management. And so what I bring to that is that I understand systems. I'm a natural problem solver, but I'm also a trained problem solver. So immediately, I don't have to, while yes, the engineering process requires that I go into workplace, figure out what's happening, document all those things. I don't even have to do that because I'm naturally trained to go in and find a solution. So that's what I bring that's unique to management, is that I don't have to, most cases, I don't even have to ask many questions. I can come up with the solution. Is it the best solution? Maybe not, because I need to do the process. But that's something that's unique to me. I am full of solutions. And that's the unique thing about how I bring my background to what I do, right? So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, right? So I think it's about saying what makes you unique with what you're doing. Yeah. And we'll get, hopefully, as we go through a little bit further, we'll see more. So you can tell your story truthfully without trashing other people in the process. So sometimes your story involves other people. So it's okay to include them, maybe not by name unless it's necessary, especially in the workplace. However, remember, you want to maintain not only your integrity, but you want to make sure that you're not trashing other people in the process when you tell the story, right? So you can either leave them out or make sure that you say it in a way that shows that you have humility and understanding and compassion, right? Because even when telling the story, if it involves someone else, if they're hearing you trash someone, to them that says, oh, this person may not be the best. They may be poor judge of character, or they're not able to get over a situation. So just be mindful of how you're telling the story when it goes beyond just you, right? And then also the final thing is check your motivations before you share. Why are you sharing the story, right? Is it going to help move you forward? Is it to just be braggadocious? What are you actually doing, and how is the story going to help you move forward, right? Check your motivations and make sure that it's inspired, okay? So the thing about building, telling a story, that it really is about really your personal brand, right? And this is something that's really, really important to know. And I think you hear branding all the time in the business space. And of course, now more recently, you've been hearing a lot about branding in the personal space. And I think I would say that a lot of people forget about personal brands when it comes to their work, right? And I think it's very important, because your brand at the end of the day, well, how many people, are you clear about what branding means as relates to people? Some people, yeah, I see some people know. So let me just define it loosely. And it's a very simple definition. I mean, I have some words up there, but the simple definition is your brand is what people say about you when you are not in the room. That's it. What do they say about you when you're not physically there? How they will describe you, what they say is good about you, what they say is not so good about you, right? Usually it's good, right? But it's what people say when you are physically not there, how they describe you. That's your brand. Yes. You don't, but you know what? You don't actually know directly, but it comes back around to you. You'll know what your brand is, because people will come back around and say, oh yeah, so-and-so told me. So-and-so said that. Oh yeah, I heard about you. Those are the kind of things that will happen, right? And that way, also on the more professional side, how you know about it is what people endorse you for on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, how many of you have LinkedIn accounts? Most of you probably do, right? On LinkedIn, LinkedIn is set up where you could actually highlight which skills you have. Whereas in the past, it wasn't that way. I mean, I've been on LinkedIn since 2003, since it was the very beginning. So it's been a long time. But I think maybe 2003, 2004. Anyway, doesn't even matter. But now you can actually, select which things you want to be endorsed for. But previously, people had to say about you. So when you go on LinkedIn, it tells you that's a professional space where people will say, this is what you're good at. So that tells you about your personal brand. For me on LinkedIn, I am most not recommended for speaking and presentations. That's because I used to do a lot of presentations and speaking, right? So people know me for that. People know that if there's a workshop or something Takia can do, if there's a topic, I can talk about it. Like I'm very comfortable in front of people. They know that, right? So those are the things that people say. So that's a great question. How do you know? But it comes back around. And it's important that when it comes back around, that you listen, because sometimes things that come back around, even if it's a positive thing, it may not be the thing you want to be known for. So, right, it could be positive. It could be like, oh gosh, Takia is great at, I don't know, say it again? At partying?
Well, people say I'm a party.
Yeah.
Which is not.
Right. So exactly. So Takia is great at party, right? Great example, right? Depending on which circle you're in, it might be great. However, you might be the life of the party, you might be exciting or whatever, but in the professional sense, you might want to figure out how you can shift that conversation, right? How do people perceive you? Now, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not really invested in people's opinions of me. I'm just not that invested in it. But in the workplace, it's important, right? Because you have to maintain a relationship and dynamic. So personally, I'm not that invested, and professionally either. But you have to have a delicate balance with that, right? You don't necessarily you don't want to manage your life based on what everybody thinks. But at the same time, it's important what people think, because especially when they're hiring you, you're building relationships, you're telling stories, you're building dynamics, and you're having a record of success. You want to make sure that people feel great about you when you leave the room, right? So I actually had in a work situation, a colleague and I disagreed on something. And for me, at the end of the day, I said, we can disagree, but at the end of the day, when we leave spaces, two things. As long as you respect me and you have positive things to say about me, it's okay, we can disagree, and that's fine. And that's the way I operate my life. So I think it's important to just know how the room feels about you when you leave, right? As part of your brand. Make people around you feel empowered. People, there's another typo, I apologize about that. People leave feeling like you can solve their problem. So that goes back to the question that you had earlier, right? When you leave an interview, you want people to feel like, oh, yeah, they would be an asset. Sometimes, especially now in this day and age where there are startups, organizations that really sometimes don't even have a job listed. They're just saying, submit your resume, we'll find something. You want them to think like, okay, we don't know what this person can do, but we think we want them. And a lot of jobs are like that right now. There's no position description, or the one they have really is kind of loose. They just wrote it because HR says put something online, but they don't know. They don't really want to hire for that, right? And it's especially, it's not this way as much in government and in some nonprofit space, but a lot of startup environments, even in the tech space, those in the emerging markets, they don't know what they're looking for. They just know they need somebody who can come and do something, and you might be that person, right? And so when you have the interview, when you have the conversation, you want to leave, even if they may say, you know what, they may not be good for that, but we want them on board, so they might be good for that, right? So just think about how you show up and how that will support you. You want to brand yourself for the job that you actually want, okay? Brand yourself for the job that you want, which is going to be important. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means, but people have a range of experiences. Even myself, I have a range of experiences. Everything I can do may not be online. Everything I can do may not be on my resume. Everything that I can do doesn't show up in an interview or conversation, because sometimes, even though it's a great skill, it may not be applicable to what I'm going through, right? So remember, when you are having these conversations and you're telling your story, you don't need to say everything and put it on the table. It doesn't need to be a smorgasbord. It could just be snippets of who you are, and you have to begin to decide which parts make sense for which opportunities, okay? So when you brand yourself, of course, there's resume, okay? There's a social media, so LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Snapchat, wherever you are online, wherever they can find you, They found you, okay? That's where they're looking. That's where recruiters are. Your website, if you have a personal website, and then the actual story, what comes out of your mouth, right? So today we'll focus on the last part, which is what you're actually saying and doing. But know that these other components are a part of the story that you're telling around jobs. Don't forget about that, right? We're here to talk about what you say, but remember that your resume, your social media, your LinkedIn, website, all those things also tell a story, because most times when a company gets your information, the first thing they're doing is Googling you. That's the first thing they're doing, okay? So it's important to just have that part as a part of the story as well. So when you begin to craft your story, that you craft your online story as well and let that support you. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be all business. It can be personal, but just know that all of that is a part of the story that you're telling. So speaking of stories, what I want to do is, I know we did some work with Maze, and I'd love to, as a segue, I'd love to have her share a little bit of, if you want to share part of your story, you can. But you don't have to though. But also what I want Maze to do is tell the value of learning how to tell your story and what that meant for you moving forward. So come on. You all know Maze, but give her a round of applause anyway. So Maze, we did some work together.
But I knew Takia when I did with them apprenticeship program. It was last year, and it was very, very interesting and a great experience. And through that, I got my job actually, and I learned a lot from them, especially about the storytelling. And they taught us how to tell our story. So my story is so long. I'm gonna start to make it. That's what happened after that. When I prepared myself and learned how to tell my story in a very professional way and a very attractive way. Practice it a lot. Then when I got the job, they approached me. The marketing team came to me and they asked me, "Oh, Maze, you have a very great story." I said, "Yes, I have." Then I shared my story with them, and they featured me in their website because they loved my story. They heard about me when I first did the interview, and they just "Okay, we're gonna feature you," and they wrote the whole story about me and they posted in their website and their own social media. My company is not a small one. It's over 70,000 employees and over 400 offices all over the world. So it's not easy to say "Oh, I'm going to share my story and feature it in their website or their social media." So the story is very, if you learn it and know how to do it, you're gonna be very strengthened for you. Yeah.
And did that help you in job interviews?
Of course, yeah. So basically, when I got the interview, they were so nice, and they didn't focus only on the technical part of the questions. They asked me about my personal life. So when they started telling me about these questions, it was very easy for me to convince them and tell them a lot of stories about myself. So they were more about socialized, more about just technical and focusing on the job description. As Takia mentioned, that nowadays they are not focusing on the job description. They just HR write down something to post it online. But when it comes through to the interview itself, and you have very attractive and nice story you build it by yourself, it will be very helpful for you. Yes.
Good, thank you so much, Christina. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so of course, the thing, Maze, she actually got featured on the website, but we're not even talking about that part, just the idea of when you learn how to talk about who you are, what you value, and what's unique about you, that's something that people resonate with. And it helps you in your conversations, right? It helps you in your conversations as you're talking to people. And it gets you a little bit out of the nervous mode of I don't have everything, or I'm overqualified, which a lot of immigrants are highly overqualified for these positions. And so there's that part as well, right? Where you're highly qualified and there's a challenge with trying to apply for roles that, because of, we're not going to get political, but just because of the situation here, you have to apply for jobs that you're clearly overqualified for, right? And I know that from even my own experiences, right? And so remember that the thing that is unique about you will stand out. That helps people understand more about you. And it also shows up in how you answer the question. The thing is, Maze mentioned knowing your story. We don't necessarily mean you have to memorize a story. It's just knowing key points. And so what we're going to do today is, of course, because we don't have a lengthy period of time to go through with every single person. So what I'm going to do is share with you key things to include as a part of your story that you can begin to remember, that you just have these, key things that you can always have in mind So when you're networking, you can use your story there. When you are going on job interviews, you can use your story there. When you're standing in line, someone asks you a question, instead of talking about the weather, you can talk about something else, right? People have no idea what to talk about in random places. The weather seems to be the one thing everybody loves to talk about. So the elements in your story are this. They are your core values, right? 1 to 3 professional facts and ideas you want to convey. And then 1 to 3 things you're really proud of, okay? And this is not, your story doesn't have to look like this. This is what I created for today because I knew we had only 45 minutes. So I wanted to put something together that would, be something that you could walk away and leave with. But as you talk to different people, different experts, everyone's going to have their different way of telling the story. Trust me, all of it works, right? Just like with anything, if you put a concerted effort behind it and put your mind to it, it's going to work. If you use it consistently, it's going to work. So know that this is not the absolute. This is just one version that we're doing for today. Make sense? Yes.
So when do you start, where do you begin telling your story? Is it after the resume is actually scanned and everything else and you make sure when you're having an interview?
So 2 ways. Great question. When do you start telling your story? So for the most part, the verbal story, then yes, it's once you're in the interview. But you can actually start telling your story before then. You can tell your story on, like I said, LinkedIn is one way to tell your story. If you feel inspired, you can post a video telling your story. The summary on LinkedIn, that's one place. That's where recruiters are going. Say it again.
Cover letter.
Your cover letter, you can tell your story there, exactly, right? So you can tell your story long before a job is actually posted, right? If you have a website, you can tell your story there. You can tell your story as you're networking, right? There are a lot of times, like I rarely get opportunities based on my resume. I just don't. Most times I get opportunities, contracts, gigs, things like that. It's because, I talked to someone, they're like, oh yeah, Takia, we had this conversation about X, Y, and Z, right? So when you're networking, so the story can be used in many, many places. It can actually be used before you actually even apply. When you're going to networking events, tell me about yourself. Pick out something that you can share, right, from your story, from your personal story. Figure out ways to ask people about what they're doing, right? So there are ways to engage with people. So it doesn't always have to be when you get to the interview. For this particular exercise, it's about like when you get there, but you can actually utilize this beforehand. So just to recap, LinkedIn profile, you can put something on, you can actually post it in your summary. You could actually, if you want to, you can do your own video. And video goes really far actually. So you can post a video on YouTube. You can also post a video on your LinkedIn profile. You can have it available. You can post it in link. Like there are ways that you can actually promote yourself. Yes.
You mean we can make our videos about our story and then we post them?
If you want to, yeah, like video resume. You can do video resume. Like there are many ways. I mean, this conversation isn't about the marketing piece of yourself, but really when it comes down to it, it's branding and marketing of yourself. That's what it is. So figure out, how do I get the word out about me, right? It could be having somebody that you know interview you. Post the interview of yourself on your LinkedIn page. I would do something like that. So there are many, many ways to do it. The very basic way is having, once you actually get in the door with an interview, having things to refer to. So that when they ask you questions about yourself, you're not like, oh, I don't know. You have to, and this is also about knowing yourself, right? When you have a brand and you know yourself, then you can answer the question about, well, what do people say about you? What do your former coworkers say about you? What would your last boss say that you need to work on? Those are the kind of questions that people ask. When you know yourself and you have a story, you can always say, okay, you have something to refer to. You have something that you can kind of click back to. Like I said, you don't have to memorize your story, and you don't only have to have one, but at least have something to share, right? You can have I have a lot of, because I have different aspects of my life. So depending on who I'm talking to, I might have a different story to share, right? So this is it. So let's jump into core values. So on your paper, many of you already have paper, which is great. You can turn over my bio right on the back of it. I'm not even offended by that. I want to. I wanted to use less paper, so I figured you would have paper. So the first thing is around core values. What are 1 to 3 core beliefs that govern your personal and or professional life? So core, like key beliefs that you have. So that's what I would describe as core values. My core values are, I have a group of them, but the two that are always prominent are choice and freedom. Freedom and choice are my two core values. And so they show up differently personally and professionally, but I know that for a fact. If you ask me what my core values are, those two. So for yourself, think about, what do you really believe strongly about personally or professionally that you would say are your core values? So I'll give you maybe 5 minutes to write down one or two, and I'll walk around. If you have questions or have no idea what I'm talking about, let's talk about it. I can help you with it, help you figure it out. Choice, so I grew up in a household that was very like strict. I like choices. Like, don't tell me I can't do something.
So it's like meant to be.
I like to have the option.
Oh,
I like the option. So don't only tell me one. I like to have the option. So like when I was young, it was like, this is what you do. That's it. I never liked that. So as an adult, I like having options. I like, so for me, that's something that's important to me in my work environment. Like, I don't mind, I can follow rules, but in terms of leadership, I can go to you and say, okay, well, these are the options, this is what I can do, or they present me with options. That works better for me. But that's me though. Everybody's different.
So I have a question for you. So going back to what you said earlier about branding, so isn't this sort of like part of your brand too?
Yes. 100%. That's exactly what this is. This is absolutely part of your brand. What you believe, right? It can range. And if you want, as a follow-up, I can send, I'll give it to you. I have actual entire values clarification workship that I do just on that only. But it's a lot. It's a lot. So we can, but I'll send you, it's like I have about maybe at least 50 values. So things like family, adventure, like I said, freedom, choice, spirituality, faith. It can be anything. It doesn't have to look like anyone else's. So for example, and it also, the reason why it's important too, I do it when I do coaching, like personal coaching with people, but I also do it professionally as well, because remember, it's a word, and you asked what's your name?
Audrey.
Audrey asked a good question. She's like, well, what do you mean by choice? Because choice to me might be something different to you, right? So you have the word, but it's important to describe what that actually means for you. Like adventure, adventure is one of my core values. But for someone else, adventure might mean wearing red shoes or wearing jeans to a presentation. That's adventure. To me, it's not. It's just that's just life, right? Or adventure to someone else might be jumping out of a plane. That's not my type of adventure. That's not me, but I'll travel, right? I travel a lot. So what it actually means to you is going to be different, and that's how it shows up, how it describes who you are. Make sense? Right. So just pick one or two. Anybody want to share their core value? You don't have to, because it's your personal business, but yes. Audrey?
I would say, you said about freedom, and I would say, I don't like to work under strict supervision, so I don't know if you want to present it to your employers, you can say freedom, because you don't want somebody hovering over you all the time,
right? Because
I'll get tense and I won't do my work. So how do you present that?
Great. I'm very, very similar. That's actually one example. Freedom for me is that I rarely work positions where I need a supervisor. Like they have one because hierarchy, but I'm able to be self-governed. I'm a self-starter. So you say I'm a self-governed. I'm a self-starter. I work well in ambiguity. That's a great one. People love that one. We work well in ambiguity, which means you don't need a lot of direction. I can just go ahead and do it, right? So at the same time, if you're going to a workplace where they have hierarchy, it's important to articulate that you can do both.
Exactly.
But then for me, how I bring it in is communication, right? So you value communication, which means I value communication with my superiors. So they know that I value it, but you don't have to tell me it, but I got it, right? So you have to be able, and that's a great one, because sometimes you might have a value that's a positive, but you also want to make sure that it doesn't seem like you're conflicting with leadership. So being able to have rapport with leadership. In many roles, they want to know that you can communicate with all levels of leadership. So I do a really good job at that. I can talk, and when I go to a workplace, I can speak to the janitor, or I can speak to the CEO. I can have good relationships across the board, right? Everyone doesn't have that kind of dynamic. There are people who do not do well in those environments. Either they can only speak to the janitor or they can only speak to the CEO and but everyone does, that's a skill set. And so also when it comes to your personal brand, know that about yourself, right? You're able to communicate across all levels of leadership, right? So that's a great question. Anybody else want to share their value or share some, if you're confused about how to identify it. Yes. What's your name? Muna, thank you.
So flexibility and independence.
Okay, great. That's a great one. That's highly valued, right? So
Respect.
respect the, yep, once again, excellent.
Mine was.
Okay, say it again.
Integrity.
Integrity, yeah. Oh, you said the same thing. Yeah, you both said it at the same time. Yeah, integrity.
I guess it's finance related.
Exactly. Many people. So tell me, what does integrity mean for you?
So integrity means doing the right thing.
Okay,
So,
that's important.
yeah.
So can I say that when you can work without supervision, you have integrity?
Right. Excellent. Yeah.
No, I mean, but then I've had interviews where folks will ask, will give an example of integrity. If you're someone who's going to do the right thing, then it's kind of weird to explain. But it's like I'm not going to tell you this, and then like when you're not around, do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another thing when you're telling your story. Like you have these core values. It's one thing to say the word like, oh yeah, I have, and they say, how would people describe you? I have integrity. I'm disciplined. What does that mean? Right. So even be able to tell a story around that, like have an example in mind of what that means, right? Because they may ask you. Someone may say, well, what do you mean? Tell me. They might say something like, give me an example of when you displayed integrity in the workplace. Or give me, if you're in a supervisory position, they might say, give me an example when someone in your workplace didn't display that and how did you handle it, right? So you never know how they're going to flip what you say. So whatever you're saying, make sure you're clear about what you're saying and what that means as it relates to you personally, right? Because you can always, like I said, the resume language is very, very easy to pick up. You can easily type that really quickly and send it off. But when you're actually conversing, what does that look like and how does it show up? Make sense? Okay. All right, so let's move on because I don't want to spend too much time. The next one is professional wins. List 3 professional things about you, whether it's a fact, achievement, award, that you absolutely want to convey to an employer. And something that you absolutely want to convey. So write down 3, I'll give you a few minutes for that. Write down 1 to 3. I put 3 just so you have something to select from, but it really can be 1 to 3 for this exercise.
Which means things that we've done already?
Yeah, things that you want, things that you've accomplished.
Okay.
Yeah, things that you've accomplished. Not, oh, I did my job. Clearly you did your job, you got a paycheck, right? Beyond, like, not that you can go above your job, but what did you actually accomplish? If you have some measures, there are numbers attached to it, I did this, right? Or, if your job is not going to quantify it, then how can you qualify something that you accomplished at work? Maybe it was something you didn't accomplish at work, but that might be helpful to know. It doesn't have to be, it could be professional. Remember, I didn't say list 3 work things, just list 3 professional things. I received a professional accolade that's not related to any work that I did directly in a job or a contract. It was just something that was outside of it, but it was a professional accolade, right? So just.
What's different?
To me, yeah.
Professional and work.
Yeah, for me, for this conversation, yes. And so, for example, I got United Prison. There was an award, like I was given an award, I was nominated as a change maker for women in technology, right? But it wasn't attached to an actual job. It was just kind of like some organization or some event, and they acknowledged me, right? So that's a professional accomplishment, but not necessarily a work-related accomplishment. Make sense? Yeah.
So, if you do that, but at some point, does it become like you're bragging?
No, because remember, I'm not necessarily telling you to say, oh, I got X, Y, Z. I'm just having you listen right now. These are just things for you these are just points for you to go back to. You're not necessarily going to say, oh, and I did A, and I did B, and I did C. You did a good job. These are just points, these are things that I want you to think about including in your story when you begin to start telling your story. But you got right. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, but I've been in situations where I do that, then you guys, then it becomes
For who, you or them?
for them.
Are you sure? How do you know it's uncomfortable for them?
Because it was a lot of money, it's like projects that I managed and then it started adding up to like $1 million.
Okay. That's a fact. It's numbers, it's facts, right? If you're in a job and they're uncomfortable with the numbers that you're giving them, then that sounds like their problem to me. But but you know, we're in different positions, so I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, my friends tell me that's their problem.
Yeah, it really is. Like if you're in a company and they can't fathom it, that means that not that it's not a good job for you. It just means that as a company, they're in a different bracket. Maybe they're not a mid-sized business. Maybe they're a small business, and that's okay. So once you have to figure out where to place it, right? So they might be uncomfortable, but that's okay. This is a side note, but I've actually had interviews where I come with my own questions. So I ask them, what do they bring to the table? And sometimes they're like, that's uncomfortable. Like they're not used to people asking questions, but I'm thinking, well, I know I'm an asset. I know I bring value. So what about my resume made you ask me for an interview? I've actually asked them before. What about my resume made you call me in for an interview? They're like, what? I'm like, well, that's a question. It's a real question. Sometimes I generally want to know, like, why did you, I'm here, but why did you invite me here? Like, what was it? And also, that's just a little, actually, you don't necessarily need to ask that question up front, but you know, usually when you do interviews, they go through the general, like, what the position is about. They ask you the basic questions, but before they get too much into who you are, if you ask a question like that, then you find out what it is that they brought you in for, then you can amplify that part, right?
Maybe just referral.
Say again?
Maybe just referral.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. It's like, oh, so-and-so said it. And you're like, okay, great. Now you know they have a connection with that person, and now you can elaborate on that. So, you know, just think of it. These are just unique ways to do it. But that's a great point that you bring up, that sometimes people might get uncomfortable. In your job, you don't want to make people uncomfortable, but something like that, what you just mentioned, was more numbers based. Like that.
Or like where you went to school,
Mhm.
or if you had like credentials that they don't have.
Yeah, it depends. You know, the whole way you went to school thing is kind of interesting. Yeah, well, it depends, right? I mean, I think where you went to school, if you are in an environment where that matters, then use it. To me, more than where someone went to school, because you know with schools, right? You could pay to get into school, like you pay for it. So at the end of the day, where you went to school is great, but yeah, you know, can you actually do some work? What did you do once you left the school? Because you went to school, great, but you left school 20 years ago. Like 20 years have gone by. What have you done since then, right? So for me, while I love my alma mater, anybody who knows me knows that I'm passionate about where I went to school because of just historical reference and things like that, and I believe in the institution. I've also done a whole bunch since then. So it's less about where I went to school, more about what did my school prepare me to do? How did my school prepare me to be in life? And if your school didn't prepare you to show up a certain way in life, it doesn't matter that you went to that place. Because at the end of the day, all you do is pay a bill. But that, you know, I
You
feel
know,
strong.
some jobs, they take you for the school that you graduated
Yeah,
from.
and yeah, some of them do. And the thing is, I did not go to the Ivy Leagues. So a job that only values Ivy League will miss out on the opportunity of having me work for them. But that's okay, because they miss out on that opportunity. Because I know what I bring to the table, right? And that's how I see it. So some of it is also mindset as well, right? And I do a lot of work around leadership and mindset, but that's a part of it as well. They're going to miss out on me because I bring a lot to the table. I just do. And so do you all, right? Anybody struggling with figuring out professional wins?
What if you just from school?
You just graduated, right? Oh, choose some. You can have a professional win in school, like from school. That's totally fine. If you just graduated, or if you're a career transitioner, you could still have professional wins in that space as well, right? Maybe you were like the go-to person in your class. Maybe your professor nominated you to be a TA. Maybe your professor asked you to teach a lesson one time. Like you can figure things out. Find out these wins don't have to be like monumental. They just have to be a win. And you have daily wins. Like every single day you get up, your feet hit the ground, there's a win, right? every single day. That's my belief system. But so it doesn't have to be monumental. It could be something very, very, it could be something what you might consider small, but what it says is that what it says to a job is that you're able to do something and accomplish something. You're able to go from one step to another. Remember, there's a saying, someone said to me previously, it says, in terms of American football, don't celebrate, you don't only have to celebrate the touchdowns, celebrate every down, right? It talks about this idea of success. Success is not only this like, oh, I've accomplished it, that's it. It's like, well, there are many steps on the way to that. So share the many steps, right? And share the failures too, because I mean, that's not necessarily about this particular thing, but it's also important to know a part of your story is to share when you weren't so successful, because a job might ask you that. And that's actually a part of your story as well. The key thing is knowing how to share the thing that wasn't so successful and how it made you better. Make sense?
Right.
Okay. And then here we are. This hopefully this should be easy for you to figure out, right? To come up with. List 3 things that you're really proud of, but you wouldn't necessarily put it on a resume. That you would not put on a resume. So don't give me like, oh, I don't know. I got the certification. Unless it's like scuba diving. That's not on your resume. Unless your job and your workspace is around scuba diving. But if so, then that's not, that doesn't count, right? Put something that you normally would put on your resume that you would consider a personal win.
Could be having 2 kids.
If it's a personal win,
It is.
having children is not easy. Managing family life is not easy. It's definitely not. It's not, especially when you are career changing. You have a lot of obligations. Like it's not. Remember, everybody's situation is different. For somebody, like there's a woman on TV who has 18 or 19 kids. Like for her, that might be easy. If I had 1 or 2, I'd be like, oh my gosh. But she has 18, and for her, that clearly it's easy. She keeps doing it, right? Or it's not. Or maybe it's not easy, but she enjoys it. I'll say it that way. They have to have 19 kids and counting, right? Yes.
Why do you need to identify this one, the personal one?
Why?
Yeah.
Okay, great question. Why do you need to identify personal wins? Because everything is not always about what's on your resume. People, when you are applying for a job and interviewing, they want to know that you're a human being. You're not a robot, right? Because as I mentioned, where you went to school, your credentials, that you accomplished X, Y, and Z at your job. If it falls within your job description, great. At the end of the day, you want them to say more than, oh yeah, they know how to do their job. It can be an icebreaker. It definitely 100% helps make it be an icebreaker. It also is good. It's a good connector, and it shows them that you bring more to the table than just your credentials. Another thing on the side note is that a lot of organizations have what's called corporate social responsibility, where they do a lot of volunteerism. They do a lot of things in the community as a part of their work. And they, sometimes that might be the key thing that might be the shoe-in for you. If a company puts a significant portion of their budget behind employees volunteering, let's say at DC Central Kitchen, and you've already volunteered, but you have a relationship with them. Oh, I volunteered at DC Central Kitchen for the past 10 years. Oh my gosh, that's our charity. Do you know so-and-so? Totally not about the job, but they know that you have a connection there, right? Or they know that you have a charitable seed within you, right? They know that you are caring in some form or fashion, right? It gives them some other insight into who you are, because who you are fully, it doesn't always show up in a job. It doesn't always show up in a job description. You are way more than a resume, and companies are beginning to understand that, right? So if you share more about who you are, then people will know who you are. They know that where they can, that they have a touch point. Like I have a friend of mine who does work in community work. Her job is around community work, but she's very community oriented, very charity oriented. That's the main thing that got her the role. It wasn't that she had a lot of experience. It was that she's really into community. She stands on corners and gives free hugs on weekends, like things like that, which might not seem, but her personal accomplishment might be like, oh, I hugged 40 people, I hugged 40 random people outside of the DuPont Circle Metro this weekend. You might think it's strange, but that's her jam. That's what she does, right? So I think just the personal piece, it can be, like I said, it can be big, it can be small. It's a win though, right? Because you have to bring something else to the table aside from your resume, right? All right. I feel like there's one more. Okay, there. Okay, so the idea behind this is, of course, I want to actually, with the things that you wrote down, what I want to do is give you about 5 minutes to see if you can craft another 2-minute story about yourself. Remember we told the 2-minute story in the beginning, right? Y'all remember that? Yes, no? No? Yes? Okay, just asking. I want you to take 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want you to craft a new 2-minute story, okay? Based on the things we talked about. It can include one from each category, include 2, but I want it to include more than one thing. I don't want your story to only be professional wins. It could be core values, personal wins, professional win, personal win. It can be a combination, but not just professional, right? Because we got that part now.
Doesn't have to have all.
It doesn't have to have all 3. If it has all 3, great, but it doesn't have to have all 3. But what I want you to do is take some time, take 5 minutes. It's not gonna be perfect, okay? One more time. It's not gonna be perfect. I'll say it again. It's not gonna be perfect, okay? So just take 5 minutes, craft it. If you need some help, I'm gonna be walking around, I can help you with it, and then I'll be do something else with that, okay? Everyone clear about what we need to do? Okay, you all look quiet, that's a good thing. I'll give you like 2 more minutes.
I don't know the story to say. Give me your story so I can get something to say.
Okay. So, I see which one I'm gonna choose.
Yeah, just present your story so that I can see.
So, when I was in high school, when I was in graduate school, I worked in a bookstore, and in the bookstore, you know, 2 things happened. I worked on the floor. It was one of my main thing, like raising sciences, but it wasn't related to my work. But I was very passionate about what I did. And so, what one of the owners told me one time was that he said, "You know, we never have to hire a manager for you because you don't need anybody on staff to manage you. When you come in, you do the job, you do it, you put systems in place, you train new people when they come on board." And I said, so, and that's it's a position that I really liked because they didn't boss me around, they never hired someone for me, and they trusted my ability to do my work, and that's one thing I really loved about that job.
Well, yeah, I can come up with a story. The thing is, I wonder if my story would be relevant because most of my experience is not from here.
Oh, yeah, it's all about it. Okay, yeah, that's a great point. So it's okay that's not for you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's totally okay. Okay, that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned it. I'll mention that. I won't mention your story, but I'll mention what you said, because that's a good point.
It looks like Mace doesn't have any story.
It's ready. It's
Oh.
I have my story.
Okay, I'll give you about 30 more seconds.
This room has a very nice view.
I love it up here. It's so beautiful. And I love outside. They have events outside as well. It's just I love this space.
Nice.
It's very, very nice. Okay. So you all know what I want you to do next. So what I want you to do is you have your story. You can take your paper with you. I want you to stand up and find another person that you did not speak to before. Okay, similar to before. And this time I want you to share your story. So this time, instead of 2 minutes, I'm going to give you 3 minutes each, okay? The first 2 minutes, I want you to tell your story. Then the last minute, I want whoever the listener to give them some feedback based on what we talked about today, right? Make sense? Are you comfortable with that? Because I'm a big believer in feedback, and I'm not able to talk to each person individually, but I think you all are professional people. You're learned. You've been in the room, so you understand a little bit more about it. So give them one thing. So what I want you to do in terms of your feedback is 2 things. You want to give them a glow, meaning something they did really well, and then a grow, something they can improve upon. If they have something to improve upon. If you think they did fabulous, then that's fine. They don't have to have an improvement. Make sense? So what I want you to do is you have 3 minutes. First 2 minutes, tell your story. And then the last minute, which is the 3rd minute, the person who listened will give a glow and a grow. Something that they did really well, something that they can maybe work on, either within their story if they seem nervous or hesitant or whatever, whatever. You can listen and pay attention. Make sense? All right, stand up and find somebody new. The person with the longer hair, if you can even see their hair, of course, is going to go first. So find someone. I feel like there might be 1 group of 3. There might be 1 group of 3. Maybe not. Oh, no. Okay. So you can do it. You want to do it? Okay. Awesome. All right. So you have 3 minutes. That's okay.
But I have I have very, for example,
Okay, so the first person should be wrapped up. What you want to do is share your feedback, listen up. Okay, so switch. I know the people with three, I'm gonna give them more time. So you can switch, yeah, change. So now the listener is telling the story, and the person who's telling the story is now listening.
Also, I live from.
You can join one of the other groups. So for those listening online, you can jot down the story, maybe jot in the Q&A section, comment section about your story. So for those in the groups of three, it should be switched to the third person. That's fine. does. Okay, I'm gonna give you about 30 more seconds to wrap up. 30 more seconds. Okay. Take about 10 more seconds to wrap up. And come back to. Yes, you finished? Okay, awesome. So come back to your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I told you we do this. People are very hesitant at first.
Yeah.
Then they get really into it. So.
Just you.
Okay, you should do it first. Yes? Okay, so
How old?
This guy, 8 years, and this one, 3 years.
Same as mine. 8-year-old girl and 3-year-old.
Oh, boy and girl? 2 girls.
There's one was born in Kenya and another one here. So one is an immigrant and the other one is first generation. I don't know what they
How long have you been here? 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. I came 2000.
When did you start watching? When I had a baby, I just took off. This is me. I have taken a boxing course. They
What do you think?
Maryland, Toronto.
okay. So for those groups of 3, time to wrap it up. Give you about 10 more seconds to wrap up your conversations. Groups of 2, come back and sit down, please.
One can be a product here, one can be a Japanese.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, come back to your seats, please. Come back to your seats. Okay, come back to your seats. Come back to your seats. Yes, I know you see, this is amazing. See, you all are really into these stories. I'm really excited about that, right? You didn't even know you had a story in you, right? Look at that. So how was that? How was it first? And I want to share how it was just telling your story. You don't have to share your actual story, but how was it to share a story or your own story?
Not easy.
It was challenging. Okay, tell me. So what was challenging?
It's tough to choose a story which you'll be able to gauge with the type of audience that you have. Like, I mean, this is supposed to be an interview.
Right.
So which story are you gonna tell? It's
right. And that's very interesting, right? It's tough to choose. So have more than one, right? Have more than one and begin to think about it. One way to narrow it down is, remember I mentioned earlier about branding yourself for the position that you want, right? So once you begin to, there's 2 things. Oftentimes when people are looking for work, especially if you really just need a job, to be honest, you're just applying to anything, right? So it kind of divides your energy, right? But if you know there's a particular area that you really want to work in, I would say try to narrow it down, because then you can see the descriptions, the position descriptions are similar, what they're looking for might be similar, and then you can begin to then craft the stories based on the type of things they might be asking you, right? One thing you can also do is for positions in that space on LinkedIn, you can contact the recruiters directly and just ask them questions. Like, sometimes you can ask the questions directly. They can give you some insight about where to focus. Like, oh, for this position, I see that under this position, there are like 10 key must-haves, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the top 3 that you think they're really looking for in this role, right? And then you can begin to craft this. Now, that's more on the credential side and experience, but it still gives you an idea of what they're looking for, right? You can also read articles.
How do you find the recruiters on LinkedIn?
Oh, great. That's a whole other workshop, but I'll tell you. So the way to find the recruiter, you can type in like find recruiters, but for the specific position that you're looking for, and I don't have it. Well, maybe when we wrap up, I can show you, but, and I'll send you a video, but on LinkedIn, you go into the actual position you're looking for, and on the right-hand side, if you're in the split view, on the right-hand side, not every position has it, but most of them do. On the right-hand side, it'll say who the recruiter is, and they'll say you can reach out to them directly. In some cases, for some positions, you need to have premium, but you don't always have to have premium to do that. One way to absolutely have access is to get premium. But if you don't have premium, some of the positions will say this is the recruiter, and you can email them directly, contact the recruiter for this position. Sometimes recruiters will reach out to you, like recruiters reach out to me often on LinkedIn. One way for them to reach out to you is, of course, in your description to let it be known that you're looking for work, right? Now that's a little bit tricky. If you're already in a job and you're looking, it's a little tricky. You don't necessarily want to do that, but let people know that you're open to work. That's one way to do it.
You should develop like a photo on LinkedIn saying transition for the job.
Yeah, transitioning. And then you can there's like incognito way to let people know too. Yeah.
Isn't there like there's like
A button.
or something
Yeah,
that says
there is.
interactive?
There's a way. So you can. There's 2 ways to let people know. You can put it in your description if you're not working or your job already knows that you're looking for somewhere else. That's fine. But there actually is an incognito way to let recruiters know. The key thing though is if someone at your job is a recruiter, then they will see. So it's tricky. But you can secretly let people know, and you can put it in your description as well to make sure that people know that you're looking. Yes.
Sometimes on LinkedIn they comment, they just actually send you the kind of comments.
Yeah. Sometimes they do that. Yeah. Sometimes they do it.
They do the relevance of relevance.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Yeah, sometimes, so it just depends. The more robust and dynamic your LinkedIn profile is, the more people reach out to you. So that's like the
It
go-to
doesn't have
source.
to be the same as your resume, because,
No.
resume.
No, it doesn't have to be the same. And actually, it really isn't, because, and this is a trick that I give people. This is kind of getting more into LinkedIn, but I'll just give it to you anyway. A trick that I tell people is people often work on updating their resume. And I often tell people the thing you want to have the most updated is your LinkedIn, not your resume. The reason why is because if you're limited in time, forget about the resume, make sure LinkedIn is updated. The reason why is in LinkedIn, if you go to the arrow down, you press other, you click print or PDF, and your LinkedIn profile becomes a resume. So if you need a quick updated document, you can go to your LinkedIn profile and print it out, and it prints it out in the format of a resume. So if you ever need a quick resume, if your LinkedIn is updated, you can always pull that, right? But that's just a side note. So yeah.
But your LinkedIn needs to talk to your resume. It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, it shouldn't be 2 different people.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Your resume and your LinkedIn should not be 2 different people.
Exactly.
That said, if you're in different spaces, like I'm an entrepreneur, so I have different things. Like I have my one sheet. My LinkedIn might have, so mine are different, but I'm definitely the same person on all of them, right? So that's important. But this workshop isn't necessarily about that, but that's important as a part of your story, because you want to have consistency as a part of your story, and that's where the consistency comes
You
in.
mentioned something about having a robust LinkedIn profile.
Mhm.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, that's a big one. Your summary is updated. For some of the positions, maybe the more recent ones, it has not only descriptions, but, accomplishments. Do you have any testimonials or endorsements? Are you a part of any groups? How many connections do you have? Are you connecting with anybody? Like those kind of things. Even something as simple as, for me, it's minor, but it matters to me. I don't know why. Customized LinkedIn URL, which is really minor, but it helps so that you can always so you can use it, right? You know, when you have a LinkedIn account and you create it and the URL for it is like your name plus 20 digits. Make it custom. Go in there and make it custom. Mine is linkedin.com/in/Takia Young. People can always find me because I know it, right? So even knowing your LinkedIn, so you can, if you meet, you never know, you can go to Sister Trader Joe's right now and run into somebody. Oh, and they may not have the LinkedIn app or whatever. You can text them, oh, here's my LinkedIn profile. You know it, right? Something as simple as that makes a difference. More so for usability purposes, right? So we can talk more about that. That's like a whole separate 2-3 workshops. But so going back to the story though, anyone else want to share? Yes.
So I have a question about telling the story. How can one improve in summarizing and emphasize when telling the story?
Great. How can one improve and summarize? Keep telling the story.
Exactly.
Keep going, telling more people, the more you tell it, the simpler it will get. And also when you look at people, if their eyes glaze over, they're not listening, right? Tell it to your family. Now, family is a little tricky. You may not want to tell your family, or you do want to tell, it's up to you, but know that everybody has an opinion. You need to listen to the opinions that matter for what you're trying to do, right? So I'll say that, but the more, write it down more, begin to craft it, think about the elevator pitch, right? So for business, it's something called the elevator pitch. It's like 30 seconds. You need to be able to tell a quick story from the first floor to the 8th floor. So if you can, like when you're leaving here today, I forgot what floor, I think we're on the seventh floor. So be able to tell your story from the 7th floor going down to the 1st floor. If you can't do that, now not the one, I gave you 2 minutes, that's a long time. But whatever you did, distill it down. That's why I came up with my line, engineer by training, educator and practice, entrepreneur at heart. I work at the intersection of lifestyle leadership and legacy building, specifically with the interest of women of color in STEM. That's what I do. Right?
I have a question. How crucial is to apply the STAR method when you tell your story?
The STAR method?
Yeah.
Which STAR method?
It's like the situation, task.
Oh, that, okay.
When they ask you
That.
What do you do, Edward? So what,
Well,
tell us
about yourself, that, okay. How crucial?
Yeah.
Very crucial.
I mean, it's crucial because it gives you a system, right? I'm a believer in systems. So if it's, okay, I'll say this, when it comes to systems, if it's stopping you from telling the story, then don't use it. If it's helping you, then use it, right? It's kind of like the same thing like with goals, the SMART. Oh, should I set SMART goals? If you're setting SMART goals, but you never accomplish them, clearly it's not working for you. So if it works, how crucial it is, it's up to you. I think it's more about how you utilize it. Is it actually working for you? So I'll say that. I've heard of it before, but I don't use it.
This is great to know that crafting your story is very important in professional career and personal life.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that our story is really interesting and attractive? How do we know that our story is good enough that people like it?
Great question. How do you know that people really like your story? They're like, oh, and they're smiling like, oh, okay. Oh, what? Like the more you tell your story, or when people ask, so there are many ways, right? People are nodding their heads, they're smiling, they're asking you more questions, right? That's one way. It's like any other conversation, because you know when people's eyes glaze over, they're not listening. So if they look like, oh, or they're like, okay, thanks, right? They're not interested. Now, that doesn't mean you need to change your story. It could also be that you're telling your story to the wrong person, right? So there's so many factors in it, you have to kind of discern, but that's one way to do it. As I mentioned earlier, one way to tell your story, to practice it, is to tell it to enough people. Go to networking events. Sometimes you might even want to try, if you're afraid to practice, I'm a big fan of go to a community of people where maybe you're not even really trying to get a job there. You just want to talk to more people, right? I mean, you still want to engage in dialogue, but you never know, you might end up getting a job, right? But engage so you get comfortable, because a lot of the storytelling really is, as I mentioned, knowing yourself. feeling confident enough to share who you are authentically. And that's really what a lot of it is about. Like, can I share who I am off my resume and people still like me and find me interesting? Because that's really, when people are afraid to talk about themselves, that's really what it is. It's like, are they going to judge me? You know, am I enough? Do I have to do all of these theatrics, right? Because especially as an immigrant, I'm going to bring up the point you mentioned to me earlier. As an immigrant, right, or first generation, however you describe yourself, right? If you don't use the term immigrant, you have to go through so many hoops for everything, right? So you might feel like, oh, is this yet another hoop I have to go through? It's like, no, actually, you could just be who you are, and that's okay. And I mean, I don't want to have a Pollyanna kind of like oh, everything is happy and roses. I'm not going to say that. But what I do want to encourage you that who you are and what you bring to the table is of value. It is. And so own that part, right? No, I mean, everyone may not value you, right? But that happens regardless of whether you're immigrant or not, right? Everybody may not value. So yes, if you're accustomed to going through a lot of hoops for things, you may feel like what you have to share may not be enough. You still have to do more, right? You have to do way more.
Yeah, way more.
You have to do way more.
I feel like yours doesn't really hold water.
Right.
There are others who I'm sorry to use the word, some BS story are actually holding the best position.
Yeah, and then sometimes that's the system we're in, right? We're in a system in the United States where some people, sometimes you might work for people who you're wondering, how are they my supervisor, right? That happens to everybody. I mean, I don't know. There's a building over there. How is that our supervisor, right? You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
So, you know, but you cannot focus on that, right? You have to focus on your own thing, which is why the important thing is telling your own story. Like, what can you bring to the table? And as I mentioned, sometimes you're telling the story to the wrong person. Remember, just like you're choosing a job, just like they're interviewing you, you're also choosing whether you want to work in that place. Remember, you're spending 8, sometimes 10 hours a day at this place. Is this an environment you want to be in? I remember this is when I lived in another state, and I'll share this brief story about uniqueness and individuality. And I think my father referred me to somebody, and I went into an interview. And the administrative assistant, and at this time my hair wasn't short, my hair had long locks, but that wasn't an issue. It wasn't an issue for me, but she kept the administrative assistant at the desk. She was a receptionist. She kept saying, psst, psst, take your nose ring out. Take your nose. They don't like that here. Take your piercings out. And I'm like, I'm okay. Okay. For me, if a job doesn't, everything that I bring to the table, if a job doesn't like me because of my nose ring, because I wear too many, today's not, it's unique that I'm actually wearing all black, which is rare. But May's nose, I'm like very colorful usually. This is a very odd day. But my nose ring, it's gonna be my hair. It's gonna be my accent. It's gonna be the tone of my voice. My voice is a very unique tone. It's either off or on. It doesn't whisper. And some people don't understand the tone of my voice. So if it's one thing, it's another. So for me, I don't necessarily want to work in an environment where my actual being, how I show up authentically and naturally is a problem. That's not my workplace. That's not my working environment. Because this is who I am. I cannot change most of it, right? I cannot change the tone of my voice. I cannot change my hair. The things that my style is, I could change it, but I'm not going to, right? So those are the things, but that comes with time. But I say all that to say that when you are meeting people and you're interviewing, yes, you have to pay attention to work culture, environment, all of those things. Those things matter, and it's important to pay attention when you're looking for it. At the same time, also know that it's a two-way road. Make sense? All right, I'll take one more question and we're done. Or do we? Oh no, we can be done. We can be done.
We can finish it here.
And then question. Yeah,
they will
excellent.
come. So thank you so much, Shakia.
Thank you.
It's a great workshop, great insight.
Thank you all for showing up.
Yes, great information. Thank you all for coming here. Just emphasize the last point that when I first take this workshop, it was very hard to me to understand how I'm going to build this story. It's just like talking everything and giving me all these points, and I cannot build my story. I cannot do it. Then after that, I went back home and started listing each story and writing it down and kept practicing million of times until I got to know my story very well and went to everybody and tell it. So you cannot like from the 2-3 minutes to tell your story right now, you have to go back and practice and write it down, read it, share it with others, and then maybe change it.
Right, iterate, yeah,
Exactly.
Totally.
And then you will feel how important is it. But from now you will feel, oh, confused, I cannot make any. No. It will be very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, if you're confused, that's okay.
Exactly. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah,
Please.
feel free, I'm here.
Feel free.
I turned this off, so good. Thank you very much. Yes, you had a question, yes.
The question was, understanding the culture, because sometimes it's a courtesy, so people may not be interested in what you're saying, but they'll just keep on nodding their head. And it's sometimes very difficult to understand if they're actually as interested in you. Or
Right.
they're just trying to, say whatever
Use
they
you
have
to move to the next one. Yeah, that happens. I mean, there's only so much, that happens, and that's okay. You just say, okay, and you see what it is, use your own discernment, and just, you realize, oh, they're not interested. Or if you feel like they're not interested, their eyes are going, then you cut your story short. Move on to the next person. If you're at a networking event, move on to the next person. I've been in situations where there have been interviews, and the interviewer, especially a group interview, and someone's talking, they say, okay, and they'll kind of like wrap them up. So if someone's interviewed, they'll wrap you up very quickly. They'll say, okay, that's enough of that story, and move on. So I think it's about discernment. Everyone's not going to like your story. Everyone's not going to be interested in it, but that's okay. That's also okay. The idea behind having your story is not that, it's about personal, it's who you are, right? Everyone's not going to like you.
But the goal at the end is to find a job, so.
Yes. Yeah.
You still have that in you.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, but it's the same, similar. Let's say, let's put away the story part. Let's just say we're doing resumes. You can send out your resume. You could be qualified for every single job, in many cases overqualified, for every single job you apply for. You're still not going to get callbacks from all of those people. It's the same thing. You're not going to get called. And you're right. At the end of the day, it's a job. You don't want to, the reason why I say that is you want to be realistic with the situation. You don't want to, I'm a believer of being unreasonable. I'm a big believer in like having unreasonable goals, thinking like everybody wants me. I'm a believer in that. At the same time, I'm also grounded in the reality that I am not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. But everybody wants me, right? So I think, it's a healthy balance. And so the same thing. Yes, at the end of the day, it's a job, and it can kind of be because I understand what it's like to look for work and feel like nothing is landing. But tweak little things. I promise you, just knowing your story makes a difference. Even if you're not able to tell it, it gives you a certain level of confidence about yourself and what you bring to the table, and also allows you to be able to take those interview questions and answer them in a more creative way. And we didn't even get into creativity as much, but that part is a very important part. That being able to talk to people and engage without being concerned. I think that's one of my skill sets, is I can talk to anybody. I mean, anybody, in any culture, any language. Even if I don't know the language, we have something to talk about. Right.
So in terms of telling your story, does the way that you go about telling the story vary by the culture of the organization and what type of job it is? Because like if you're a finance person, you're trained and you have a science background, so it's somewhat similar. That you're trained to just be just the facts. Just tell me like what my options are if I'm like looking to acquire something. Tell me what your experience is on that, but they're not going to want to get deep into, I'll just call it a story that has a lot of fluff. It's going to be just the facts, how much it costs, what you consider.
You absolutely have. You have to know your. So you just mentioned it exactly. You have to know your audience. So you have to know who you're speaking to. Know the person as well. Like if I'm meeting somebody, I go to LinkedIn. I find out what they're talking about, what they posted about, what they recently tweeted about. When I go find out the company, to answer your question about the company culture, that's kind of a culture-based conversation as well. Go to the company's blog. What's the most recent thing they posted about? Right? Because sometimes they might be a very fact-based organization, and the way that you have it, make it a more personal conversation is to bring up something they recently acquired. Oh, I heard you all recently acquired such and such. It can be in passing. Like I've done that before. Had a conversation with someone, and I mentioned a recent business goal that they just hit, and they were like, "Oh," and one person even said, "Oh, I didn't even know that." I said, "Yeah, it's on your blog." What that tells them is that A, you really did your research. B, you're interested more globally about what's happening. So it's like sometimes you may not have an opportunity to tell your full story, but you have to show up. You have to show up. Like, don't be a robot. That's the key thing. That should be the title. How to not be a robot, right? So you may not get a chance, especially in a more strict or kind of like structured environment. You may not be able to tell the story about that time. Like I may not be able to tell the story about, me crossing the stage and how I'm disciplined, right? But what I could say, if they ask me about something related to food, I say, oh, no, I eat a vegan menu. I've been eating vegan for 19 years. That says I'm disciplined. I can follow guidelines. It's something personal without bragging, but it gives people insight into who I am as an individual, right? So just think, like everything can't be an exact science. Like you can't like maneuver it like an exact science, but people don't underestimate what people are paying attention to when you show up in a room or what you say, right? People are paying attention, and companies are also looking for something different as well. They recognize that things are not business as usual, right? No longer in the world. Like, look, Google, who was the other companies that recently decided to release the degree requirement? It was Google, 2 or 3 other companies. Thank you very much. Thank you.
By the way, guys.
Yeah, you can go. Yeah. I'm just answering questions because people are asking them. And you have my contact information is not up there, but it's on. Yeah, you can find me online everywhere. Takia Young. Thank you. The values. Yeah. And maybe if you want, I can do an actual worksheet to kind of cover what we talked about. Yeah. The degree requirement. So companies are realizing they have, especially if you're in the tech space, they're realizing they have to change. And so some companies are looking for something different. So you have to just pay attention. And that's where the studying and the research about a company comes in to understand the culture. You can even, going back to LinkedIn, you can reach out to somebody who either A, had the position before, that's a little tricky, or B, someone who works there currently and ask them. Yeah, I've done that. I do that. Oh, tell me more about such and such. What do you like about working there? Like, so it's just approaching it from a different perspective, but you don't ever, sometimes you never know who you're walking in, who's going to be in the room when you walk in. Right? You have an interview, but you don't know. This day and age, it's more global. You can look somebody up. You can find out how many kids they have, you can find out where they ate dinner. Like it's crazy what you can find out about people online if you do the research. But still, that said, you still don't know who's walking in, who's in the room when you walk in there. So it's hard to say. There's no exact science. There's no exact science. I'll say it that way.
And then please feel free to exchange your email.
Yeah, definitely.
Feel free to email.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, you all. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, yes. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, really?
Okay. The fact that you see that you are open.
Okay, good, thank you. Oh, no, okay, thank you.
My question is, I look at your resume, so you cover the resume, and you're not you are an engineer by training. You talk about your STEM education, right? So one thing that is I'm trying to complete 5 years it was Ethiopia. So 5 years of school. We had MLP, That is what the rest of the world accepts. The US States and Brazil. Okay, it's a library and, America. So it's trying to promote having education, right? But that makes me think about it. Because when I go to offices, because people would ask, we cannot be good on saying,
Unless you're the top 10 for a balance.
you're not even, that route.
Well, I think it's how you present it. Like, I'll be honest.
Because I'm
Most
kind
women,
of,
right.
like a business analyst.
Yeah.
It's that.
But see, the thing about it is most women, especially women of color that I know who practice law, don't practice. After 5 years, they're done. Most of the ones I know. I have a lot of friends. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who have law JDs and they're done. 5 or 6 years, they're over it. So don't get in the way around it. Some of it is just focusing on what skills did you practice or learn from that experience, and how does that translate? Like, that's the piece I think that's really important for you, is figuring out how does it translate? How do you translate that over to what you want to do now? So maybe in that case you lead with what you want to do, and you say, oh, you want to bring in some, oh, when I did such and such, that helped hone my skills on X, Y, and Z, or when I did that, this helped me do this, or helped me look at this differently, or because of that, I know how my communication skills are. So I think it's just, instead of, just articulating what you learn or what skills you practice as a result of studying.
But not a for consultant, right?
No,
Not
I wouldn't.
Say, I'm a lawyer by training.
No, yeah, totally. I would tell you that.
Personally, I kind of stupid. I don't even talk about being a lawyer.
Well, it's your choice, but I would tell people. If I was a lawyer, I would tell you. Well, first of all, I mean, and on top of that, in America, you don't even have to go to law school to do that.
Yeah.
You just have to, yeah. Thank you very much. Oh, was it helpful for you? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so no, I wouldn't be afraid, but it's your choice. See how, try both. Have 2 different versions, see what happens.
Yeah. And like, it's like, sometimes it's like the problem is, here, you talk about like simple stuff and they're interested.
Yeah, when you're black, when you're of color, they want.
When you have a color, it's like so many doubts.
Yeah, you have to, unfortunately, yeah.
So, I'm so when I see like, they're like, and when her family party was starting, it kind of, you can see all the faces.
There's a lot of judgment.
Yeah, right?
And that's kind of where we are. Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes it's just figuring out, sometimes it's saying, okay, like, deal with the conversation and moving on.
Yeah. But I like the way you say, you may not be talking to everyone, favorite person to everyone, and that's okay.
That's totally fine.
That's totally fine. Yeah. So now I'm like moving.
Yeah.
You don't like me? Okay,
that's
good.
fine.
Nice.
Exactly.
Billion people out there.
Yes. Good.
Thank you so much.
That's
It's really helpful. So are you coming back to class next month?
Well, it's up to them. If they want.
Yeah, well, I'm
well,
gonna be on
yes,
campus
ask
later.
them.
And then, I never heard of it.
Yeah, your profile. So if you go to your profile, I'll show you what
Where is it at? I have the Prime, but I don't use it.
Now they have this, they have now.
It's like an ID.
And with your profile.
Oh my God, how did you go?
So you go to account, privacy, edit public profile. See, edit your custom URL. See how long yours is?
Okay, you can custom it anyway.
Yeah, so you can make it your name.
How's yours?
Mine is just the key, my name.
So you can delete all the them, but you can't delete this.
No, oops.
I didn't. But you really can't delete.
You have to keep the LinkedIn, but you can type whatever you want.
So you can just mark it. Yeah, or something.
No.